I'm really having a good time tonight. I hope you're all having a good time tonight and enjoying yourselves. I really appreciate the hospitality that I'm being offered. Dr. White, let's talk a bit about original sin. Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden. Before they eat that apple, we'll call it an apple, they're perfect, yes?
Perfect as, sorry, apologize. There we go. Testing 1, 2, okay, there you go. Perfect as in God created them to be upright, yes.
Perfect as in knowing good from evil?
Not in the sense that they had, not experientially as yet, no.
Okay. So Adam is in the Garden of Eden, and God puts the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. Adam hasn't sinned yet. Adam hasn't eaten the apple yet. God knows at that point in time that you and I are going to have this conversation right now.
Not only knows that he decreed it, that's why he knows it. His knowledge is based upon his decree.
Okay. So Adam eating the apple was part of God's plan.
Yes, sir.
Are there babies in hell?
Are there babies in hell?
Yeah.
As you may have, I'm not sure if you were quoting me when you were talking or not, I believe that God has the exact same freedom in the salvation of infants that he has in the salvation of adults.
That's not my question.
Well, but I'm explaining it since you asked, are there quote-unquote babies in hell? I believe that God has the same freedom in the salvation of infants that he has in adults, since all of us, no matter what our stage of development, are fallen sons and daughters of Adam. Then God would not be under any compulsion to show mercy to anyone. But I believe that he does, based upon the very same freedom that he has in saving any adult person as well. So I do not know, I cannot look someone, and I've been a hospital chaplain, so I've had to do this more than once. I cannot look at someone and play God and tell them what God is going to do in that situation. My response always is, the judge of all the earth will do right, and leave it to the very same thing that I do with my children or anyone in my family.
So when Adam was about to eat that apple, when God put that tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, he knew that he would be in this situation right now. He decreed it. He insisted on it. He made it happen.
He chose to glorify himself in this particular fashion through the atonement of Christ, yeah.
He made it happen.
When you say made it happen, what do you mean? Are you differentiating between primary movers, secondary means, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm saying that if I take my keys and I drop them, the keys have no will. I'm saying that I know that I'm going to drop these keys and they're going to fall. I knew that was going to happen. But God was more sure than I was that Adam would eat the fruit, that Adam would cause the fall of that would cause the fall of man, and that billions and billions of souls created by God who he loved would go to hell as a result.
God's knowledge of the future is not analogous to your knowledge of physical laws. That would be a category error. However, the point that you're making is that God knows the future and that the future flows from his own decree. Of course, what did not follow was the conclusion that you included in your question.
Is it not then God's will that billions and billions of souls are in hell?
It is God's will to glorify himself in the salvation of a particular people and to demonstrate his justice in his just punishment of many others. I don't know. First of all, I don't think there's anybody in hell right now, so I want to correct that. I believe that's a future state. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know what the percentage of people is going to be who are going to experience his grace, and the percentage of people is going to be who will not. So I don't know how many people there are, but their just punishment was not only known to God, but the result of his will from the beginning. Yes, no question about that.
So you don't think that there's anybody damned?
No, I do believe that there are people that are damned. All I said was hell is if you're familiar with the book of Revelation, it says that death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. Mm-hmm. The dead right now are not in a place called hell, they're in a place called Hades. They're not the same thing. Maybe you're confusing those two terms.
Mm-hmm. But God had all of this in mind when Adam ate the apple.
Ephesians
In fact,
chapter...
it was God's will. It was God's intention. God could have stopped it if he didn't want it to happen, but he chose not to.
Certainly God could have stopped anything that he did not want to have happen, as he does very regularly in curbing the evil of man, and we never thank him for that. But I do differentiate very strongly between talking about God's decree and the fact that God's will, as revealed to us, is found in his law. We don't know what God's secret decree is. God's will says, thou shalt not murder. So you need to differentiate when you're using the term will, because you're asking a Christian theologian what he believes about that, and I will have to differentiate on the basis of the Scripture at that point.
I'm confused.
Okay.
God could put everyone in heaven anytime he wanted to. God could show his grace. God could show himself. God has, and many times during the Bible.
Very complex question. You've already gotten to two different places that I would have to interrupt you and to answer part of the question.
Please do.
When you said God could, are you talking about before creation, before he began to do his work? Or are you talking about now?
Both.
Well, theoretically, prior to the fall of man and to the working out of his will, God could have just created us all to go to heaven, and that would have been it. He never would have glorified himself in the cross. He never would have demonstrated his love or mercy. He could have, theoretically. Mm-hmm. But once the fall took place, then no longer is that a theoretical possibility, because God has already begun to act, make promises, and God's not going to go back upon the promises he's already made to the prophets or whatever else it might be. So you have to pick and choose which area you're going to approach there.
Let's do that again. God could not choose right now to send everybody to heaven?
No, because he's made revelation. He has revealed exactly how a person is to go to heaven and exactly upon what grounds. He has given prophecies. He'd have to be able to lie, and the Scripture says God cannot lie. And so to vitiate his own prophecies, he would have to be able to change his own nature and be able to say, I was dishonest in what I said before.
Moses had one covenant. God gave us a second covenant with Jesus. That changed the rules.
No, it did not.
2 minutes.
No, it did not change the rules?
You're not understanding the relationship of the covenant of grace, which actually begins with Adam, and that each one of those covenants are a representation of that covenant of grace. There is a fundamental unity that exists through those, even though that there is a difference in how those things are worked out. The book of Hebrews makes it very plain that the argument you just made is not really an accurate argument to the New Testament teaching.
It's not an accurate argument. No. So, God could have done something once before, which is send everybody to heaven, and just glorified himself by showing himself to everybody. Now he can't do that. Now he has to glorify himself by sending lots of people to Hades.
God will be consistent. God will be consistent with the promises he has already made. Yes, he does not change, and he has made a revelation as to what he's doing, and he's not going to change that.
I'm done.